This is where we are at the present time, where the M74, the proposed M74, crosses over the A74. It is the most northerly end of stage 1 of the M74 motorway, which runs from Welburn in the north, 8 kilometres to Poniel in the south. Stage 2 runs from Welburn going northwards for a distance of about 4 kilometres, and the final stage, stage 3, runs from Poniel to Douglas Road End. That's the 3 stages that make up the M74 motorway. This is where the paving operation begins. We are now at the batching plant, where the aggregates and sand and cement is mixed to produce the concrete pavement. The batching plant is situated on Eastwood Farm, which was a farm that the contractor bought at the beginning of the contract, which he has developed extensively for granular material and borrow pits, and also rock cuts. This is the 20mm aggregate that's come from Hindford to be used in the concrete mix delivered by the payloader to the hopper bins. This is the concrete delivered to the truck, which will deliver it to the PQ train. The concrete is filling the truck about 10 tonnes of concrete delivered from the sprit drum mixer at a rate of over 200 tonnes per hour, and the lorries pass through at a rate about maximum rate about 1 lorry every 2 minutes. This is the destination of the concrete. It's travelled about a kilometre to the paving train, where it is delivered in between the forums and into the reinforcement to build the concrete carriageway. We're now about 600 or 700 metres in front of the paving train. We are standing upon a cement-bound granular base, 100 millimetres in thickness, on which the concrete slab is laid. Beneath the cement-bound granular base there is 150 millimetres of granular material used as a drainage layer underneath the motorway. This is where they're building the rails either side of the carriageway, building in a dry mix bed upon which to put the forms, and the train itself will run on these forms. The forms are positioned to an accuracy of plus or minus 3 millimetres. This is the longitudinal crack inducer that is put down between the fast lane and the slow lane, and between the slow lane and the hard shoulder. It is to form basically three longitudinal joints, three lanes of the carriageway down throughout the job. Having placed the longitudinal crack inducers and the forms been accurately put in position, the steel reinforcement is put down about 200 or 300 metres ahead of the concrete train. The steel reinforcement consists of high yield 60mm bars placed across the carriageway at a spacing of 135 millimetres. That is the longitudinal steel. The transverse steel is 12mm bars at 500mm centres. The steel mat is held in position by the high stools, which give a cover of the steel to the top of the slab between 75mm and 112mm. This is looking from another angle at the steel, and you can see how much steel reinforcement is in the concrete slab. There's about 0.65% of the concrete slab made of is steel. The terminology used for the concrete slab is continuously reinforced concrete pavement, CRCP. The steel is continuous from between the bridges or from where the job starts, and it's lapped at about 80 metre lengths. The main longitudinal steel is lapped in 80-metre lengths, and the lap is staggered across the carriageway, such that in any section only a third of the steel is lapped. This is us cleaning out immediately in front of the train, blowing all the debris out that is gathered between the forms and the steel to make it quite clean before the concrete is laid between the steel. This is us then at the paving train, where we have immediately in front of us the first spreader box, followed by the second spreader box to put down the finished layer of uncompacted material. After that, there is the vibrating compactor, followed then by the first oscillating screed, and then where the first tent is, that is the final diagonal screed, and then the last operation is the surface texturing to give the roughness required for skid resistance, and finally a curing membrane is sprayed on to seal the concrete slab until it... This is the first spreader box taking a lorry load of concrete, 10 tonnes of concrete getting dispensed into the spreader. This is our laboratory taking a sample of the concrete for analysis. We will analyse it for strength and for its workability. Tell us when. The first spreader box is now spreading that concrete out in the initial layer, which is just to cover the steel and no more. It will use that 10 tonnes of material in as many seconds. This is the second spreader box, which puts on the final layer of concrete. He has got to place the concrete, the loose uncompacted concrete, to such a thickness that the compactor will be able to compact it adequately. If he puts on too much surcharge, then it clogs up the compactor and the first oscillating screed. If he puts on too little, then there's the likelihood it may not be compacted sufficient. You can see the two levels of concrete. The finished road level is the top of the rails, and the second spreader has got to leave a certain surcharge of loose uncompacted material above the top of the rails, but not too much. This is us at the part of the plant that does the compacting of the concrete. Those paddles at the front there are used to take off small ridges that are left by the second spreader box. In the middle of the bit of apparatus we have a vibrating plate compactor. And at the end of the bit of apparatus there is the first oscillating screed. A roll of concrete about 4 to 6 inches is ideally suited in front of that first oscillating screed. If there's too little, there's a likelihood of it the wrong level's been achieved at the end of the job. If there's too much, then that means that the second spreader has put too much surcharge on. The first oscillating screed leaves about 2 or 3 millimetres of concrete above the final road level, and that at the appropriate position, the cat's eyes, or the box out for the cat's eyes, are placed adjacent to the longitudinal joint. A polystyrene box out is used. Above the crack inducer that we saw originally, there is a myothene strip, a white strip of material that is ploughed in. You can see the two ploughs ploughing it in directly above the crack inducer to complete the longitudinal joint. This is the final oscillating diagonal finisher. This is taking off the 2 or 3 mil of material that was left on by the first oscillating screed. And the diagonal screed leaves the finished surface apart from texturing. It screeds diagonally to take out any irregularities, local irregularities there might be on a particular form that might be out of level. This is the last section of the train where the finished surface is textured by brushing to produce the required skid resistance for the traffic. This is the brush that moves transversely across the slab, a wire brush that puts the finishing texturing on the concrete slab. The brushed surface is then sprayed with a aluminium spraying compound in order to cure the concrete. It seals it, it keeps off the solar heat, though there's not much of that today, and it also traps the water within the concrete, so it drying out to allow it to gain strength at an early stage. The fresh concrete is then covered by low tentage, which is pulled behind the train, about 50 metres of low tentage to stop any damage from any rain that might come and wash off the texturing. And beyond the 50 metres of tentage, the concrete is stiffened sufficiently enough not to be damaged. But in weather like this, with the cold nights, there is insulating mats put further down outside the low tentage to protect it from freezing. After all the operations that we've seen at the PQ train, this is the final product. 11.3 metre carriageway, stretching in places continuously without a joint for about 4 kilometres. Concrete pavement. This is a view of the A74 dual carriageway at Lesmahagow, the old Milton Bridge, with the new motorway, the M74, adjacent to it, to the east of the existing A74. This is on the other side of the motorway, on the east side, where we have an old mill, which has some history involved with it, which the motorway alignment had to avoid. It's in fairly bad state of repair just now, but there's a contract out to put a new roof on it at Christmas. Coming across to the bridges that are on the job, there's 6 in all. This one we're standing next to is the largest. That's Wellburn Bridge away in the distance where the PQ train operation was. This is a shot of the old Milton Bridge, which was constructed around about the Second World War, about 1938-39. Steel girder bridge, plate girder. And adjacent to it we have the new bridge, where we have the concrete piers in position, all the substructure complete, waiting for the manufacture of the steel girders to form the deck, which should be delivered to site and erected sometime in the spring of '86.
Right, we're now moved on to the 15th of May, and you can now see Milton Bridge starting to span across the River Nethin. This is the first of 2 bridges that you see. The first three sections have now been spliced together, and they're also cross-braced between the two outer girders. The outer girders are 2.5 metres in depth. The span is 47 metres that you see. Okay. The three girders that you can see on the ground are the stringer beams, which will sit between the two main outer girders. On top of these are the shear connectors, which connect the concrete of the deck to the steel. There's the same thing up on the main girders as well. Over to your left, we have the A-frames, which will be used to support the formwork of the deck, on top of which the concrete is poured. Okay. This is a 300-ton hydraulic crane which is being used to lift in the girders. You can see the end two girders lying there. They will also cantilever out over this end pier, and the last girder will be placed from down near the river. This is now Monday 16th of June. You can see girders B5 and 6 and A5 and 6 being erected. They're now putting in the cross frames. Two girders are sitting on the bearings. Bearings are not grouted, and they will place their cross frames in and bolt these up as a temporary stability to the two girders. You can now see that bridge number 2 has all the steelwork in place, and they're proceeding with the construction of the deck, which consists of concrete, approximately 200 to 300 mils thick. The deck plywood you can see there, and it's supported immediately below that using aluminium strongbacks. These are placed on steel A-frames which connect to the top. Now you're looking at the cantilever section of the deck, which they're decking out on, again on steel A-frames. Below this you have the timber truss, which is used as a working platform for the joiners to construct the deck and place their support formwork. You can see the curve, the horizontal curve of the girders, and at the cross frames there are I-section shear connectors. These are special shear connectors because of the forces involved. Okay. Right. On the ground here you can see the girder section A23, which will be connected to the end of girder A1, which is already in position on the temporary trestle. A23 will project out, will be connected onto A1 and will sit over Pier B, which you see in the distance. Right, as you can see, the next stage is the erection of Bridge 1. This is Poniel Borrow Pit at the south end of the contract. In this contract, the contractor has to provide a fair quantity of imported suitable material. For this he chose to use a glacial deposit of sands and gravels here at Poniel. As you can see, this material's now been taken out right down to the water table, and now we can see where he's actually run into the rock head. He's actually ripping this up and using this now as suitable import for the embankment. We have come across some small coal deposits which have obviously posed a little bit of a problem, and these have been dozed up to one side to allow access to the rock underneath. Here at the west end of the Borrow Pit you can see the method of removal of the rock. They're using a ripping machine here which is currently pushing up the material. This area at the end of the day will be re-landscaped and returned to grazing by distributing several thousand cube of unsuitable material in here. Here we are at the southern end of the Stage 1 contract, standing actually on Poniel Bridge. You can see over in front of us the Poniel borrow pit and the extent of the excavation there, and now you can see the US tip where the material is going to come from to re-landscape the borrow pit, and also the end of Poniel fill, where the last few thousand cubic metres of suitable material are being placed. An operation completes the last 70,000 cubic metres of suitable fill to be put in this embankment and severs the existing A74. You can see the A74 and the diversion which it was necessary for the contractor to install to complete the embankment across the A74. And now as we move round to the west roundabout, you can see this has been used in its completed form for the diversion of the traffic. We estimate this diversion will cater for about 870 vehicles per hour in each direction over the holiday period. It's now Monday the 8th of September, and we've now moved on. You can see that bridge number 2, which was the first bridge, is complete as far as surfacing and parapets. There's traffic being going over the bridge. You'll see the crane sitting on the bridge, which is being used to construct bridge number 1. Bridge number 1 has got 3 of the 5 concrete pours done, and you can just see where the 2 additional pours are being prepared just now. They'll be cast simultaneously in a few days. This is the articulation joint at the north end of the bridge, which you can see they're just starting to cut out the tar and make up on bridge number 2. Right, this is pour number 5, which is getting blown out here, ready for the pour in a day or two's time. The concrete, there'll be about 100 cube of concrete in here. Concrete being used is air entrained concrete, which will help to give a frost resistance to the deck. Right, you can see the hot rolled asphalt surfacing here, which has been used over the bridge, and over there you've got the huts for the welders, where they're welding up the parapet railings. Right, that's us leaving Milton Bridge now, and we're heading on further up the road. I'll hand you over to Robert Kajanar now. This is Junction 11 on stage 1 of the M74 extension. This is about 1.5 kilometres from the southern end of the contract at Poniel. Looking ahead, you can see the existing A74 passing over the hill, and then as we move round to the right, the construction of stage 3 of the motorway extension contract, which takes us from Poniel down to Millbank Climbing Lane, the other side of Douglas. See the surface of the concrete carriageway and the roughness of it. It has a wire brush finish, and on top of this you can see that we're now starting to mark out for the white lines for the motorway. So at this stage we are installing the cat's eyes in the carriageway. This is usually left till the end of the contract when they're. Also, you can see that we've installed a central reservation crash barrier to prevent vehicles crossing from one carriageway to the other, and this should improve the safety of this road greatly. Here we are once again at Poniel Borrow Pit. The last time you saw this, they were still excavating rock from this area, and we were actually standing on top of a US pile. This US pile now has been spread out over the low areas, and the area is now waiting to be topsoiled and returned to agricultural use. The pole you see standing in the middle there is to be resited in this last lump of material spread out. We're now standing on top of Poniel Bridge looking northwards along the existing A74. You can see that it has been necessary for us to divert the traffic onto the new works and round the west roundabout here at Poniel to enable us to construct the new motorway across the existing A74. This actually has caused a fair amount of congestion, though luckily we haven't had too many tailbacks over the holiday periods. Here we are south of Poniel interchange, and on the approach for the A74 traffic we have a 20-mile-an-hour speed restriction before the roundabout, and to help make the drivers aware of this we've installed some rumble strips which consist of coarse stone, and they sit approximately 16 millimeters high and are intended to make the drivers aware by producing a considerable amount of noise. As you can see, the traffic approaching this first rumble strip is not tending to do 20 miles an hour. In fact, the highest speed we've recorded at this first rumble strip, 330 yards from the junction, has been in excess of 80 miles an hour. Here we are at the very last section of stage 1, looking down into stage 3 where they're starting to prepare formation for the road. This actually is the end of the Norwest contract, and the stage 3 contract has been undertaken by Watlings Limited.
Well, on this wet morning we're here at the motorway again for the opening ceremony, and it's a very miserable morning, and preparations are now being made for the ceremony, which will take place shortly. The ceremony is to be performed by Michael Ankrum, the Member of Parliament, and the police are here making sure everything is tight for security reasons. And final preparations are now continuing. There's a speaker being covered from the rain of the PA system. And it's a really miserable morning, but when an opening is planned, it's got to go on.
What can you prepare for the old ones? It's working. You got the bomb with you? We've not been knocks in the training.
Well, here we have the ribbon that's going to be the official opening ribbon stretched across the road there, and we'll have a few people here just now arrived for the ceremony. Also on this stand we have some scouts who have just arrived here for the ceremony, and lads.
Mr. Minister, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning and to thank you for joining us in a brief but very significant ceremony to mark the opening of a vital new addition to Scotland's motorway network. Now, in a sense, these occasions are historical markers. From today, millions of future users of the M74 will change the habit of a lifetime, and we feel sure that the benefits of that change will be significant. Now, we are naturally proud of this project as an engineering and planning achievement, but we must never forget that the investment is for people, whether association with industry, recreation, passenger transport or tourism. Their convenience and safety are the cornerstones of the policies pursued both by the Scottish Office and Strathclyde region. The success or failure of these policies can be influenced by many factors. We cannot always assume that the highest standards of design and construction will of themselves secure all these objectives. This is an occasion when we celebrate an achievement, but we do so with thanks and humility. And I would now like to invite the Reverend W. Niven to say a few words of blessing on behalf of the route and its future travellers.
Let us pray. Eternal God, Creator and Father, when you looked upon your creation, you saw that it was good. Look now in blessing upon this highway, which by your gifts to them, your people have been enabled to build. We thank you for the inspiration of planners, for the skill of engineers and designers, and for the labour of all who in any way have attended its construction. Grant your blessing to all who shall use this road, and give to them the spirit of courtesy and goodwill, the spirit of carefulness and self-control, that by their thought for others, all may be preserved from needless danger, and may travel in peace, and arrive at journey's end in safety, through him who is the way, the truth, and the life, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Minister, Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I now formally welcome Michael Ancrum, MP, Minister for Local Government and the Environment. The Secretary of State represents central government as roads authority for all trunk roads and motorways. As on previous occasions, Strathclyde region has acted as your agent, and we hope that together with the contractors we have fulfilled the requirements of that agency to your satisfaction. On behalf of all guests, I can say that we are delighted that you're able to be with us this morning, and that a very busy ministerial diary was adjusted to accommodate this. Minister, I now invite you to address the company and formally open this length of the M74.
Convener, ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate the completion of this fine new stretch of motorway, the first section of trunk motorway to be opened in Scotland since 1980, and a notable improvement to the road infrastructure of this country. Can I say that I'm delighted to have been invited to perform the opening ceremony here this morning. I think we're all a little disappointed at the weather, but on the other hand, a little water is good for a christening. As we view this fine example of modern engineering skills, it's perhaps appropriate to reflect on the dramatic improvement in road travel which it illustrates. It's known that during their temporary occupation, the Romans themselves constructed a track in this vicinity, and local people will be familiar with the track known as the Roman Road, and perhaps it perpetuates part of the route used by those great road builders in their time. After the departure of the Romans, it appears that little or nothing was done for many centuries to improve or even maintain the road between Glasgow and London. In the first half of the 18th century, it was reported that the official time for the coach journey from Glasgow to London was 10 days, but more often than not the run took a fortnight or more. In the early part of the 19th century, Thomas Telford and others supervised improvements to the entire length of the road, but of course traffic was at that time confined to pedestrians, to animals and horse-powered transport. With the arrival of motor vehicles in significant numbers in the 1920s, the importance of the A74 was recognised, and construction of the first section of dual carriageway was carried out in the late 1930s. The dualling of the whole route was completed in the 1960s, and amongst us today will be people who at that time considered that the road users' millennium had finally arrived. Inevitably, the increase in the use of private cars and increasingly heavy commercial vehicles, allied to their ability to travel at ever higher speeds, made it necessary for the northern part of the A74, which was the oldest and most heavily used part of the dual carriageway, to be replaced. And so the M74 between Maryville and Draffan came into being. The decision was subsequently taken to extend the M74 southwards as far as Millbank and work on stage one of the present scheme, which is distinguished by its concrete surface, began early in 1984. Later in the same year, the construction of stage two began. The new sections of motorway, which we see today, stands greatly to the credit of Strathclyde Regional Council, who designed it, and to the contractors, Norwest Holtz Limited and A. Monk plc, who with their subcontractors carried out the work. And because of that team effort and the work of all those who themselves were involved in building this road, we shall be able to enjoy a smooth ride today, a benefit which will be shared by the millions of travellers who will use this motorway in the future. You know, as road users, we seldom think of the enormous effort required to provide us with high-quality roads. The scale of the operations involved in the construction of these two sections of M74, totaling some 12 kilometres in length, can be best summed up by a few brief examples. For instance, some 990,000 cubic metres of earth and 248,000 cubic metres of rock were excavated, and some 508,000 cubic metres of earth and rock were brought onto the sites to construct the embankments. 8 road bridges, 5 large culverts and several smaller culverts have been constructed. The most spectacular bridge is that over the River Nathan, where the width of the valley called for a particularly long and complex structure. In addition, every effort has been made to blend the motorway into the landscape, and the appearance of the new road will be further enhanced in the future with the maturing of the 75,000 trees and shrubs and 3.5 kilometres of hedging which have been planted. I'm delighted, if I may say so, that we have here with us today members of the first Blackwood Cub Group who have contributed to the landscaping of the new road and therefore to the amenity of the area by planting 20 trees at Veer Road. I would like, on behalf of all of us here today, to thank the members of the Cub Group and to congratulate them on their efforts, which will be a source of pleasure and pride for many years to come. Road users will not, of course, view this new section of the M74 in isolation, and neither does the government. It forms part of the continuous route from Glasgow to the north end of the M6, which is the most important single communication link between Scotland and England. A further 1.7 miles of motorway are under construction from Poniel to Millbank, and preparations are continuing for an extension of the M74 at its northern end from Maryville to west of Fullerton Road in Glasgow. Indeed, a programme of improvements to the A74 is also in hand, which includes carriageway strengthening, the provision of continuous central reserve barriers, bus laybys and junction improvements, including the grade separation of some of the busier ones. These measures are all intended to improve the safety of the road, which, though no worse than the average for a rural dual carriageway, must nevertheless be a prime concern on such an important route. At all times, and perhaps particularly when we're travelling, we are reassured by the knowledge that our safety is watched over by our excellent ambulance, fire and police services. These are represented here today, at their best, if I may say so, by the presence of Constable William Yule, who has for some 20 years assisted, advised and controlled travellers on the M74 and A74, and who is now about to retire. He is the longest serving motorway patrolman in Scotland, and I'm sure that you will all wish to join me in thanking Constable Yule for his contribution to our well-being and in wishing him a long and happy retirement. I think, Convener, that we can take pleasure from the achievement represented by the opening of these two stretches of motorway today. But significant though they are only part of this government's programme of upgrading and reconstructing Scotland's trunk road network. I've recently myself had the pleasure of opening the final section of the new A9 and the Creetown bypass on the A75. These schemes bring to a total of 220 miles the length of new and improved trunk road open to traffic in Scotland since 1979, at a total cost of some £580 million. We're sometimes accused of failing to invest in Scotland's infrastructure, but I believe that the figures I've quoted show how wide of the mark such criticisms are. In fact, today I'm issuing to the press a map which shows the government's record of achievement in this field. As well as the roads completed, we have 21 miles currently under construction and several major schemes planned to start in this present financial year. Altogether, there are 265 miles of new and improved trunk roads planned for the future at an estimated cost of £570 million. And these plans include extensions of the M74, M8 and M80 motorways, the completion of dualling of the Perth to Aberdeen route, extensive improvements to the A75, including several bypasses, and the important reconstruction of the A82 alongside Loch Lomond. And when we consider the electrification of the Edinburgh to London and the Glasgow to Ayr railway lines, and the recently announced improvement to Glasgow Airport, it is apparent that great efforts are being made to ensure that the road, rail and air facilities in Scotland will be adequate for future needs. These provisions and plans represent together a substantial commitment of effort and resources at a time when there are many other calls on public funds. And by making this commitment, we fulfill a promise and we underline this government's determination to continue with the improvement of Scotland's infrastructure and communications. Convener, we celebrate today the opening of the Draffan to Welburn and Welburn to Poniel sections of the M74 with gratitude and congratulations to all those who have been involved. It's my privilege to take part in this ceremony, which marks the culmination of their efforts. And on behalf of all those who will use this road in the future, I would like to say to all those who have been involved in its construction, the warmest of thank yous.
I invite you, on behalf of both contractors, to cut the tape with this small piece of fine cutlery.
Wonderful. All right.
I have great pleasure in declaring this new stretch of the M74 open.
Hello. Thanks very much for your help. Did you enjoy it? Good. How many are there in the group?
22. There's 22 here today.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it? That's right. Keep waving. How many trees did you plant? Which of you planted the trees? Oh, they all do them in groups. That's great. Well, I'm glad you came along today. Is that a morning off school? That's nice, isn't it? Nice to see
you boys come down now?
Yeah.